We all know Thanksgiving. It was a feast between the natives and the pilgrims in the early days of American civilization. Obviously, that's not the whole story. The legend goes that the natives showed the pilgrims how to grow food and helped them survive the winter. This is true, but it's not the whole story. They didn't make an entire holiday because some pilgrims ate with the natives. Days of Thanksgiving were very common in Old England, as well as other religions, especially around the time of the harvest. Before the Reformation, there were 95 holidays, on top of the 52 Sundays, on which people would be required to go to church and not work, on top of paying for an expensive festival on many of those. The Reformation decreased that number drastically and replaced most of them with days of fasting or days of Thanksgiving. Puritans cited these days as the causes of floods, drought, and other natural disasters, but that's for another day. The Pilgrims brought their Thanksgiving Day traditions with them to New England. The feast, that's cited as the origin of modern-day United States Thanksgiving, was a real thing that was well documented and was celebrated by 38 pilgrims with the natives as a holiday required by their charter. The charter stated that the day of our ship's arrival at the place assigned in the land of Virginia shall be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. The natives had also given them food over the last winter, helping them in their time of scarcity. However, that's not the whole story. There were several days of Thanksgiving held by New England. A few of these days were recognized as the titular First Thanksgiving, including celebrations in 1621 and 1623, as well as a Puritan holiday in 1631, though the famous story does come from the previously mentioned time. The Pilgrims' traditions may have also been influenced by watching the Day of Thanksgiving in the Netherlands for the relief of Leyden, as they celebrated annually. That celebration eventually became known as Oktoberfeest, and is still celebrated today. Today's celebration of Oktoberfest is a little different from the US Thanksgiving, but the traditions are similar, with gathering, partying, and specific meals. As with most things in the 17th century, the celebration turned pretty dark pretty quick. Supposedly, a native tribe killed a white man, so white men killed the tribe. They set their villages on fire, and they killed those who survived the fire. They celebrated the day of Thanksgiving to the bloody victory, thanking God that the battle had been won. Real thankful people, those guys. Basically, everyone just celebrated their victories, no matter how atrocious, and made a holiday out of it. We eventually realized how heinous those actions were, and based Thanksgiving on celebrating the natives, rather than killing them. Obviously, America isn't the only place in the world that has days of Thanksgiving. I'm American, but I know not all my audience is, and I find the traditions and customs of other cultures far more interesting thanks to their novelty. For instance, some historians believe that the first Thanksgiving in Canada was to celebrate a 1579 voyage, as they made it to the Americas through storm and ice. French and American influences entered the country and shaped today's Canadian Thanksgiving, taking place on the Monday of the week in which November 11th occurred, celebrating the harvest. In Australia, Thanksgiving takes place on the last Wednesday of November, so either the day before or 6 days after the American Thanksgiving. In Brazil, an ambassador enjoyed Thanksgiving festivals so much that they made it an official holiday. Grenada, an Indian island, also has a Thanksgiving around this time of year, but it's to celebrate the invasion of the island, making the island democratic. In Liberia, Thanksgiving is used to celebrate the American Colonization Society, which supported moving freed slaves back to Africa. In the Philippines, Thanksgiving is an unofficial holiday, but it is still very commercialized. There are a lot of similar holidays celebrated across the world, such as in Germany. There's a Harvest Thanksgiving festival celebrated primarily by Christians, having significant religious components, and can even go so far as having a parade. Japan has a Labor Thanksgiving Day, where everyone celebrates everyone's labor to make the world livable. The United Kingdom has its own harvest festival as well, but it doesn't have a specific date. It's usually celebrated on or around the equinox, though. Southern India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia all celebrate a 3-day festival known as Pongal. This festival takes place in mid-January, but according to the regional calendar, it takes place at the end of a month. The festival is to give thanks to the sun god for a successful harvest. The festival dates back more than 1,000 years. Alright, looks like the holiday ones are just going to be short, because there's not really a lot to talk about holidays. Maybe other ones will be longer. I expected the Halloween one to be the longest, but obviously it wasn't, because I was most interested in that one's origins. But unfortunately, there's just really not a lot to talk about with these holidays. I guess I could go a little bit more in depth, but I don't think I necessarily need to for these kinds of things. I think the length is fine as is. I wanted to get this out on Thanksgiving Day, but I didn't have the time, thanks to, working and stuff. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm trying to get back into the groove of making these. It's really fun, but it's time consuming. I don't know how to end this.